This is the Connecticut Water Guy Hour. And now here's your host, Paul, your Connecticut Water Guy.
All right, welcome back to another edition of the Water Guy Show. I'm Paul, your Connecticut Water Guy.
And I am Ethan, the sound engineer.
Awesome. The two of us are going to blow your mind today.
We're blowing minds today?
We're blowing minds.
Wow.
This is one, this episode, for those of you that are new to the show, this is a show that we talk about all things water. When it comes to water coming into your house and water making your life hopefully better, improving it, and finding out if you have problems, what we could do to fix that. And just a recap introduction, this is Paul with Advanced Water Systems over here in Richmond, Virginia, authorized Connecticut dealer in this area. And Advanced Water Systems is actually the number one largest dealership of Connecticut products in the world.
Woo!
Woohoo! Number one.
Yeah.
Yep, and we're close to the end of the year here, and we are still number one. There's somebody on our tail, but we do everything we can as perfectly as we can and treat everybody right, and that's the basics behind getting a really rock-solid business with good growth and happy customers.
Absolutely.
So if you think you might need some help or have any questions about your water, 877-60-WATER, or you can visit our website at connecticutrichmond.com. We've got YouTube channel out there, Connecticut Richmond. You can look it up and find us that way. Got tons of new videos. And our newest podcast is called Water Guy Podcast.
Awesome.
And it's out there on all sorts of platforms. This is kind of I'm really pumped up about today, because there comes points where you're like, there's not that much you could talk about with water.
Right. But you've been doing a good job of it, though.
Yeah, but I try not to duplicate things. And then when we have to duplicate, literally we'll just do a replay of a previous show.
Right.
Because I don't want to just keep saying the same thing over and over again. That's no bueno. But tonight, I figured we'd kind of do a step back and kind of talk about the history of tap water in America.
I like it. It's a historical video. I like it.
This is one of those things that I started asking questions, and I didn't even know what the answers were. So it's one of the things I love about this show. Mm-hmm. Is we get a chance to learn things and start doing a whole bunch of research and fact checking to make sure that, if there's statements or myths or anything out there, that we can debunk them or prove them correct. But I kind of was thinking, well, what is the history of water in America? Like,
right.
How did we get to the point where we just take it for granted that we turn a faucet and water comes out?
It's such a common utility.
Yeah, it's the one that nobody thinks about.
It's no longer a luxury. You
don't think about it unless it's not coming out.
Right.
Or it's coming out in the wrong spot, like spraying out of your wall.
Right.
We don't mess with the water that comes back out of the toilet or any sewage stuff. That's
no.
No. We're not that kind of water treatment. So right off the bat, one of my first questions was, well, how did this whole thing get started? I mean, it's America.
Right.
It goes way back.
Yeah.
And not everybody had running water. I mean, good grief, we had outhouses.
Right.
In pioneer days.
Just holes in the ground.
Holes in the ground. Little privacy. Actually, what they call it the privy. I think the privy is actually the real name. What is that?
I think there's a phone. Yeah, let me close the door real quick. Hopefully that'll drown out the phone noise that's happening.
We're so popular, people are trying to call in.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't know where the phone is, so we can't answer them. But anyway, so we got water out there. How does it get into our houses? Mm-hmm. And we got to go all the way back to like 1754.
That's a lot of time.
That's a long time.
That's a lot of years.
Yeah, that caught me by really surprise. I'm thinking that's before the independence.
Right.
That's crazy.
Right.
So Bethlehem, Pennsylvania was one of the first places to introduce lead pipes as service pipes into buildings.
Lead pipes.
Lead pipes.
We love it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But this is back in the 1700s.
Right. So they didn't know any better.
They did, yeah.
It was it was the product that worked.
Yeah, lead. We'll talk about lead too, but oh my gosh, yeah, lead is one of those things that it causes all sorts of bad stuff.
Right.
It wasn't really until like 1813 until iron pipes started to be used. So, and that's a long time ago. That's 210 years ago.
Right.
So, for the beginning, they were using lead pipes, and this is one of those things that lead. If you want to be a little nerdy about it, if you look at the periodic table, the scientific symbol for lead doesn't have an L in it.
Right.
Do you know what it is?
Oh, now
I'm putting him on the spot now.
So there are a few elements that come to mind where the atomic symbol is not
top of mind
anywhere in, like potassium is K.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's
lead,
kind of like that.
Is it PB?
Yes.
Yeah, PB. Cool.
It's PB. Good job. He had no idea I was going to put him on the spot.
It was a little pop quiz.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because PB doesn't have any of the letters that lead does.
Right.
So you're kind of like, some people, I never even thought about it until I was in a certification class, actually. We're EPA certified for lead safe renovation.
Gotcha.
That's a whole nother topic. But one of the things that they taught us in that class is that lead, PB, the way that it got its name was PB was short for plumbing.
Okay.
So they used lead so long ago, back when they came up with the periodic chart, that they actually, it was primarily used for plumbing because it's a soft metal. You can make it into stuff.
At the time, it was crucial to that application. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense then.
So that's a little known fact about the origin of lead and PB.
All right.
But anyway, so we're back in the late 1700s, and we've now got some pipes as service pipes going into buildings.
Right.
So they're realizing they need to get away from the outhouse thing and carrying buckets in.
Yeah.
But in 1802, up in Washington, D.C., actually, from a spring on C Street, which I don't know exactly where that is. I got to go to D.C. next week. But I'm probably going to go look for this spring on C Street just because now I mentioned it, I feel like I need to see the thing. But this spring was actually piped into a few select businesses and houses.
Okay.
And this is back in 1802.
Right.
So it's not too far away from the White House, right? Do you know what street the White House is on?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
I do not.
Pennsylvania Avenue.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's Pennsylvania. Now I'm going to sound like an idiot if I'm wrong, but in 1809, Pennsylvania Avenue was connected to that spring that's on C Street. And right there is the White House. So basically, a few years later in 1833, the White House got plumbing on the main floor. So, nice. Little history that, the White House did not have indoor plumbing until 1833.
Nice. And to confirm, it is on Pennsylvania. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, you were correct.
All right, good. I was going with my gut on that one.
Yeah, your gut is right.
So 1833, White House got plumbing on the first floor.
Awesome.
1832, the year before the White House got plumbing, take a guess what part of the country had the very first filtration plant.
Filtration plant.
And I'm going to give you a hint. They were using slow sand in this filtration.
Slow sand. So it would be on the coast. Yeah?
Kinda, yeah.
Kinda?
It wasn't a very good hint. All right.
Yeah, give it to me.
Where are we right now?
Really?
Sitting in the city of?
Richmond,
Virginia.
Huh, okay.
We had the very first filtration plant, and it was actually hooked up, 1832, I said, and it was hooked up. We had 295 users. So,
okay.
Feeding basically 295 unique locations. So, yeah, I thought that was actually an unplanned, really freakish surprise that Richmond, Virginia was first with something like that.
Okay.
I would have never guessed it. And then 10 years later, 1842 at this point, up in New York, the Croton River, hopefully pronouncing that right, had the first aqueduct, trying to use like mass, larger scale distribution. Take a guess what they used for piping. You'll never guess. But I just like hearing you guess.
It's not lead.
No, it's not lead.
Because we moved away from lead.
Yeah, we
at this point.
moved away well, we haven't moved away from lead.
Right. Okay.
No,
So
they just started using lead in 80 years earlier.
Gotcha. I'm going to go with copper.
Nope, something bizarre.
No. Bizarre.
What did they have a lot of back then? I'm giving verbal cues here. Trees.
Okay, wood pipes.
So, yes.
All right.
They took logs and they hollowed out logs and used them as basically underground pipes. And to make them stronger, they wrapped wire around them.
That's resourceful.
That is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Being a plumber now, I look back and the stuff that was done just blows my mind.
Right.
Yep, New York in 1842 was using hollow logs and wire to tap into and create the aqueduct.
Wow.
That's pretty weird stuff. So, and then another one, Elizabeth, New Jersey. It's just weird that every single one of these is all on the East Coast. Really not that weird because we're talking about back in the 1800s, right?
Right.
So the West Coast really hadn't even been fully explored and developed yet.
Yeah, we had not finished our manifest destiny yet.
That's it. So pretty much the East Coast is still where it's happening. So up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, in 1855, they put up another filtration plant, and then it kind of people started putting them up pretty regularly after the dust got settled on the one in Richmond and Elizabeth, and then really for the next 15 years until the late 1860s, there was 136 waterworks operated in the United States. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, 136.
Wow. Taking strides.
That's in the late 1860s. Now, to put this in perspective, when was the Civil War?
Ooh, that was in the mid to late 1800s.
1861 through 1865.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so pretty much that 4-year period really slowed down a lot of things that were happening.
To be expected, I guess.
To be expected. Yeah. So that just wanted to throw that in there that at this point in time, we're talking about Civil War era.
Right.
That's a long doggone time ago.
That is a long time ago.
And so the Civil War was wrapped up in 1965, and everybody's recovering after that, and progress continued. You can't slow that down forever. And in the 1880s and the 1890s, they started coming up with these things called rapid sand filters. So instead of slow sand, just kind of using gravity and kind of like just a bed of sand to catch stuff, they were using these mechanical sand filters to go ahead and basically crank up production, because they realized this was not going away and that people were coming to expect running water.
Of course.
So they were playing around with these rapid sand filters, and then they started. This really shocked me. Back before we were even in 1900s, they were playing around with chlorine and ozone for disinfection way back then.
Well, okay.
Yeah. So I guess it's not that crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking 120 years ago, which isn't that terribly bad. That's a little more than double my life, but it's kind of sobering when I think about it like that. But yeah, so they were playing around with chlorine and ozone. And then in 1908, up in Jersey City, New Jersey, another East Coast one, that was the first utility to use sodium hypochlorite. If it sounds familiar.
Salt-based?
Clorox.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, bleach. Basically, they were using bleach. If you look on a bleach label, it'll say sodium hypochlorite.
Okay.
So they were dumping bleach in their water. And then in Chicago, So we finally start to get into, the Midwest at this point. Has a place called Bubbly Creek. I'm dying to see why they named it Bubbly Creek. But this was way back before pollution was becoming a big problem. But in Chicago, in the Bubbly Creek area, they instituted regular chlorine disinfection. They said, we're going to go ahead and take this a different step, and instead of just throwing bleach in there, we're going to use good old pure chlorine. So they got aggressive with it.
Okay.
So that was in 1908. And then 1920s happened. And they realized that these pipes, we're starting to crank out some systems at this point. We were in Chicago, all up and down the East Coast, and they're either steel or lead. So they're basically metal pipes. And when water is inside metal, it tends to be aggressive. It tends to try to clean it and make it rust and decompose and oxidize and things like that. So they started playing around in the 20s with this anti-corrosion additive that they were putting into the water. And the point of that was so that it could actually coat the inside of the pipes.
Okay.
And what it ended up doing is it kind of put this skin on the inside of all of the plumbing to help keep the water from really making a lot of contact with the metal. And they found that was very effective, a wonderful way to go ahead and keep all their metal pipes from bursting holes all the time.
Awesome.
So anti-corrosion stuff was thrown in there 100 years ago at this point. And let's see. If we go forward a few decades into 1942.
Skip World War I there.
Yeah, well, we're right in it.
Yeah.
41 was
39 was the
actually
beginning of
41
World War
was
II.
World War II.
Yeah.
So we skipped World War. I don't even know where World War One. Wasn't that like 1918?
Yeah, around then.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
So basically, World War II. We're in the middle of World War II, 1942, and the U.S. Public Health Service adopted drinking water standards for biologicals, fluoride, arsenic, selenium, not Selena Gomez, but selenium, and they the first rules were kind of established at that point.
Right.
So that's 1942, and man, that was a lot of stuff. We're already coming up to our first break. I can't even believe it.
Wow, you came up quick.
Well, hopefully this was a history lesson that didn't get too terribly long and boring. But don't go away. We have to do some commercials, and we'll be right back for more of the Water Guy Show. So don't go away. All right, welcome back. Thank you for returning after the commercial break there. This is Paul, the water guy, and
This is Ethan, the audio guy.
the audio. Yeah, so the two of us were putting on an entertaining show. We were almost thinking we should have kept running during the commercial break because we are funny. At least I think so.
I'd like to think we're funny.
Yeah, you didn't laugh when I talked about my Selenium Gomez joke.
I gave you a very, very appropriate chuckle. You received the chuckle from me.
Okay. Well, I'll take a chuckle if that's all I can. That's all I can get. So before the break, we were talking about the history of tap water in America, and we kind of went through history, and I found out over the break that some folks in this room really love history.
It's me. I really love history.
History, and what else do you love?
International affairs.
Yeah,
that was a class that I strived in.
Yeah, like Bill Clinton. Okay, so a little humor. Back to task here. So we covered a whole kind of like an outlay of how we got to where we are in terms up to 1942, how we got there. Lead pipes, iron pipes, how basically the White House first got plumbing on the main floor back in 1833, and Richmond got our first filtration plant in the U.S. And from there, it just kept growing mainly in the East Coast, and then it started growing throughout the country. And they realized it's on a course to be our mainstay. It's going to be one of those basic utilities.
Absolutely.
So, 1942, the U.S. Public Health Service adopted drinking water standards for biological, like pathogens, for fluoride, for arsenic, and selenium. I won't say the joke again. Wasn't that funny, but I think I'll laugh later on. And then in 1946, they added hexavalent chromium to that list. Sound familiar?
That's a vocab word.
Yep, hexavalent chromium. You may have seen the movie Aaron Brockovich.
I have not.
Really? So that hexavalent chromium was actually what that movie was about.
Okay.
So go watch Aaron Brockovich.
Got it.
And then you'll understand. But Aaron Brockovich came out much after 1946. So they had already identified that hexavalent chromium was a problem.
Absolutely.
And it was on the list, the naughty list. And then a few years later, 1957, membrane filter process was approved for bacteriological analysis. So we're getting into like membranes at this point. So there's a lot of advances in how water really is getting treated, getting made safe, and getting out to houses and businesses. So it's starting to become just normal. There is a little note here I want to throw in that except for the coliform, they call it the coliform standard in interstate commerce, which makes it sound like if you're sending water over a state line, you can't have coliform bacteria in it. Okay. So other than that, the U.S. drinking water standards were, you're going to love this, non-enforceable guidelines. They were recommendations.
Well, yeah. I mean...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have all these things out there, and they're like, yeah, well, this is what the water should be like. But there wasn't any teeth.
Right.
It was just, that's what we recommend.
Yeah.
Until the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974. I was already 4 years old. And by the time they realized it, maybe they need to get serious about, regulating the quality of water to at least pretend that it's safe. And then I had in the 1960s, there was just a widespread use of metal piping for distribution systems. So in the 60s, things really took off.
Right.
So that, that's like over 60 years ago at this point, but doesn't seem that long. And then the 1974 crept up, and then we had that official Safe Drinking Water Act that finally got passed, and it changed them from being non-enforceable to a few of them were actually enforceable. Basically, those you have to have water that meets these standards. And then all the way up to 1986, you went before they had prohibited lead in public water systems or in facilities providing water for human consumption, drinking water. So 1986 came around, and that's when they decided, no more lead.
All right.
Yeah, that
probably not a bad choice.
I was already driving a car by the time they figured that out. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all these dates just they're really ringing home. So there were some cool, not cool things that were going on to really get a lot of attention, and not just recently, but everybody still for some reason thinks that Flint, Michigan is like a recent topic, but this kind of like is a good segue to start talking about Flint, Michigan. So Flint was an interesting story. Flint, Michigan got their water from Lake Huron up until April 25th, 2014. And they made the decision to change pulling the water from Lake Huron to the Flint River. Yeah. It just doesn't sound good, right? You know, when you're like, I'm going to pull it out of a river.
Right. Well,
First, a lake.
I feel like I feel like that's because we as Richmonders have a view of a river, that being the James River, and the James River is kind of yucky. But I can understand where you're coming from with that. Absolutely.
Yeah, we look at it now, but that was 2014. That
Right.
wasn't that long ago.
Right.
It was only like 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So they made this decision. Government made a decision that that impacted people's health. Imagine that. Without getting up on the soapbox there. There was some changes from Lake Huron to the Flint River. One of them was that it was just nasty, and they knew it was nasty water. So they had to put more disinfection in it than they had to do when they were pulling it out of Lake Huron.
That's a Band-Aid.
Yeah, well, if you disinfect it enough, it'll be good. But the water was also more acidic.
Right.
So if anybody listening is on a well and you have any like typically blue-green stains in your house, that is a sign of aggressive water basically grabbing a hold of and removing copper from the plumbing system of your house, namely your pipes and anything that's brass. So if you've got this or seen this at somebody's house, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Water, basically it becomes acidic and starts pulling out these softer metals. Mm-hmm. Well, softer metals like the metals that were used to actually create the distribution system up there in Flint. Mm-hmm. Now, it gets even worse because the pipes were relatively good up until they switched over to the Flint River because they had that anti-corrosive stuff we were talking about. So if you can imagine, there's lead pipes and there's this protective skin that has kind of built up on them. And all of a sudden you start changing the water that's going through there, and the water starts removing this protective skin. Now all of a sudden you've got super contaminated water. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's bad. And yeah, that skin is apparently pretty brittle. I didn't realize this, but it's one of those things. It's also really impacted by like construction activities. So if they're out there pounding on a water main, they'll actually like break off whole sections of this toxic skin.
It's that brittle.
Yeah, like it hangs on to you start shaking and banging on the pipe, and I guess it'll like come off. It's not permanently attached. It's just kind of like a protective coating.
Right.
Like a slimy skin. But it's a little harder than that. It just kind of like cracks off, and then when it cracks off, it exposes you to all that funky stuff that it was protecting you from all these times.
Right.
But yeah, that was really bad. And then this whole thing started April of 2014, and then in 2016 they said, "Holy crap, this is bad," because they were starting to do some testing, and the water was coming out brown, and lead levels were off the charts, and people had already been exposed for almost 2 years at this point. So this is bad. And they actually switched back to Lake Huron water, but at that point it was too late.
Damage was done. The
damage was done. The coating had been messed up, and they have never recovered from that. Mm-hmm. That was pretty bad. I had another Flint fact.
Flint fact.
Flint fact. In 2014, 2015, right when all this was going on, Flint also had an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease.
They got hit with a double whammy.
Yep.
Oh,
bad.
No.
It basically Legionnaires. We covered that on what was that episode? Pathogens. Yeah, I think it was pathogens.
I recall it. I do recall it.
But we did a deep dive on Legionnaires. You can listen to that one in detail. But think of it like a really, really nasty pneumonia. Mm-hmm. But it gets in the water, and it is not your friend. It's bad stuff.
Absolutely.
So they had Legionnaires get out there, and so they got lead, they got Legionnaires, you're thinking, how much worse could it get?
Yeah.
They also had fecal coliform.
Oh, I did know about that. Yeah.
Oh.
That's something that I heard about.
Yeah, I hadn't even heard about anything other than the lead contamination.
Right.
Until I started doing this deep dive. But yeah, fecal coliform.
Wow.
Fecal. Sounds like feces. Comes from poo.
That's exactly.
It's exactly what it is. It's poop coliform. Like E. coli. Like you hear about at, what's that big? They just had a recall of...
Was it a recall of some sort of like I know Great Value recently recalled like their bagged berries and everything, like frozen bagged berries for some sort of disease. Was it something like that or?
It was I thought it was something weird like a fruit.
A fruit.
Cantaloupes, that's what it was. Just happened.
Cantaloupes. Okay.
It was like melons or cantaloupes.
Okay.
It was something that I'm thinking, how in the world do you get E. coli inside the cantaloupe?
Right.
It must be on the surface of the cantaloupe because you don't usually get E. coli inside something.
Right.
It's usually like it's on the outside and it gets a chance to penetrate. Like maybe if they were doing, because they water the fruits with water that's like irrigation pond because some places don't have a lot of water. So they'll recycle the water over and over again. And unfortunately, you've got animals out there that are, animals and people that are pooping.
Right.
Pooping in the water that ends up watering your plants and rinsing them down. So if they've got E. coli, then your plant now has E. coli on the outside of it. And then you end up, there's no great way. You can't really bleach all of your fruits.
That doesn't tend to bode well for the fruits,
No,
unfortunately.
No. Fruits and bleach they're not good amigos.
Yeah.
But yeah, so fecal coliform was found up in Flint, and that was due to a failure to maintain sufficient chlorine levels. So so they just messed up in so many ways. Yeah,
that's unfortunate.
And then
there's more.
Yeah. So they have, how the pendulum swings. It goes, okay, we don't have enough chlorine. Now we're going to go ahead and overdose on chlorine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to just let's turbo dose this thing. And then they start exceeding the trihalomethanes. So that's a big fancy word for disinfection byproducts, which is another big fancy word for what happens when chlorine is used as a disinfectant in the pipes. And it runs into organic stuff, and it breaks down, and it creates these they're carcinogens. They're cancer-causing trihalomethanes, and there's 4 of them primarily that are actually regulated strictly by the EPA, and the limit on those for anybody that's just curious is 80 parts per billion for trihalomethanes. Okay. That's important because you definitely do not want to exceed that because carcinogens are never good. We talked about that before.
Yes.
The chlorinated water in somebody's house, and then you end up getting in the shower and you're basically in a little gas chamber. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to be gassing yourself with carcinogens.
Absolutely not.
But that's exactly what Flint did. So Flint had so many problems. I don't even know if they can ever recover from that reputation. I'm sure their property values are not just stellar right now.
Yeah.
But, all right. So going back to lead. So as of the latest, there's some data out there. Because I'm of course asking the question, how much lead pipe is really still out there in the U.S.? How bad is this? Most states have no idea. They haven't tracked it, or they just refuse to give up any information because they don't want to be the next Flint, Michigan. So the best estimates are that in terms of service pipes, and a service pipe, for somebody that doesn't know, that's the pipe that comes all the way up to the house or the building. It's basically the part that's underground that goes out to the main line. Mm-hmm. But that's the one that we're going to track. And before I go getting into that, we're going to be coming up on our next break, and I just want to remind everybody, you can reach us over at the office at 877-60-WATER, or Connecticut Richmond is our website, and you can find us on YouTube with Connecticut Richmond, or Water Guy for the podcast.
Spotify.
Well, yeah, all different platforms.
Whatever platform you're on.
Yep, so don't go away. We're going to be right back after this commercial break. All right, this is Paul, the Water Guy. I just wanted to welcome everybody back. Thank you for sticking through the commercial break. And Paul, the Water Guy, and I am the Connecticut Advanced Water Systems guy here. And we're in our final section of this episode where we're talking kind of about the history of water in America.
Woo, history episode.
Woo-hoo. Yes. So before the break, we ran out of time just before I was about to drop some bombs about lead pipes. So it was kind of funny because we were trying to figure out how much lead piping there still is out there in the U.S. for lines that are leading into people's houses. Not necessarily in the house, but just the ones that are underground that are connecting the house. And the best estimates that they have is that there are still between 9.7 million and 12.8 million pipes still feeding places that are lead.
That's a lot of lead.
That's a lot. That was like a mind-blowing number there.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still in use. That just blows my mind. And there was they kind of went state by state, and there were a few states that were not able to, quote, provide complete data. One of them was Virginia. Surprise, surprise.
Come on, Virginia.
In all fairness, the other three were Hawaii, Minnesota, and Washington. So all spread out. It wasn't like we're all in one area. But Virginia, I found it ironic that Virginia, of course, was one of them that couldn't give any data. They think that Virginia still has 97,000 pipes that are lead.
That's so much lead.
That is just another mind-blowing number. 97,000 pipes. But, of course, there's not a lot of records on that.
Right.
So a lot of people, I get the question, is lead that bad? And it's funny, not funny. I got a new guy starting, and he's young. He's like 27. Super smart and quick, and he's trying to outmaneuver me. I can tell. trying to best the old guy.
Give you a run for your money.
And I was like, hey, you gotta give me a little bit of slack here because I know that you don't know what I'm talking about. But when I was growing up, we would break thermometers and roll the mercury around in our hands, and it was just cool. It was like the guy on Terminator. And worse than that, if you were fishing, you would actually use your teeth to crimp the lead weights onto the line.
Wow.
You see? Yep. Ethan's younger than I am, too, and his eyes are huge right now thinking, that's crazy.
Hey, I mean.
And I grew up we mentioned on previous things, I grew up on a farm in Iowa.
Right.
So I had a pellet gun. Pellets are made out of lead.
Yeah.
You don't always have a good place to hold your pellets, except for your mouth.
Yeah.
So
naturally.
So I remember, going out and plinking at little, whatever I could plink at, targets and flies and anything. I was a really good shot, by the way. But I don't remember much about it because I seem to hold a lot of those lead pellets in my mouth between shots.
It's funny because when I was a kid and I had a pellet gun, and there were brands that were breaking away from making lead pellets, but there were still some that were making lead pellets. And I was doing that as well, and my mother would yell at me, "Don't keep those lead pellets in your mouth."
You remember the dust?
I do remember the dust.
Anybody listening knows what I'm talking about. It was that little container that they would come in, they'd get rattled and jostled around. Mm-hmm. So there's little fragments of lead dust everywhere. So so let's just say that growing up, it's amazing that I'm still alive. and can even function halfway normally. But I did remind my new guy that times were different when we were growing up.
Yeah.
So you got to give me a little slack because I may have lead poisoning for all I know. And after reading, all of the problems, so lead causes, even in low doses, which scares the heck out of me now, brain damage, nervous system damage, learning disabilities. This next one completely shocks me. Short stature.
Oh, well.
Imagine how tall I could have been.
Could have been gigantic.
I'm like 5. I was 5'11" and a half. I could have been like 7 feet tall, probably.
The Jolly Water Giant.
So I did not know that lead makes you short.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Impaired hearing, which I've always referred to my hearing as having husband ears. Yeah. I just. But apparently it may be more than that. And blood cell damage.
That's a big one.
Lead is not vitamin L. You do not want to put that stuff inside your body. And even as adults, though, it's really bad on kids because they're developing, right?
Right.
Your brains are developing, your bones are developing, and if I understand it correctly, it was explained to me that lead is it's kind of like calcium. And it makes sense because lead is a metal. Calcium is actually a metal.
Is it?
Yep. People didn't realize that.
I did not realize that, yeah.
Yep. Calcium is a metal. So they're both metals. So we're kind of like Terminators. We all have a metal endoskeleton.
I like that.
I like that, yeah.
I like to think about that. Okay.
So sometimes your body, if you have lead, it will treat the lead like calcium and actually deposit it and use it in your bone structure. Yeah, that's terrifying.
Get yourself some lead bones.
Yeah, so you have lead put into your bones thinking it's calcium, and it can take what I heard was over 30 years once it gets deposited for it to kind of naturally like purge itself out. That's a long time.
Yeah.
So if you get lead, you mess around with lead, you're going to be paying for that for a few decades. Mm-hmm. If you can survive that long because of all the other horrible things that it causes. But it can, in adults even after you're done growing, you don't want to be running around exposing yourself to lead on purpose because it can cause cardiovascular disease, and it impacts reproduction and damages your kidneys.
Ooh.
Yeah, those are bad. Kidney damage, bad. So, yeah, lead is a scary thing. And it related but unrelated, we talked earlier, we are actually EPA and North Carolina Department of Health Services certified for lead-safe renovation.
Yes.
And that's important. I know we're going to segue just a little bit because lead is such an interesting topic here, but lead is all around us, and houses that were constructed. If you're listening and you're living somewhere prior to 1978, I hope that I have scared the heck out of you with lead at this point, because the toxic amount of lead, they try to do this demonstration during our some of our classes, but I have to go in every so many years and go in for refresher classes and renew the certifications.
All right.
But it's actually one of those, it's a good thing because it's a reminder of how bad this stuff is. If you think of like a sweet and low packet, mm-hmm. The amount of, if you tear one of those things open and just pour it out, it's not that much. Right. It's not like a sugar packet. It's way smaller than a sugar packet, mm-hmm. Because it gives you the equivalent sweetness, doesn't give you the equivalent amount of stuff.
Right.
So there's not that much stuff in there. But that amount is a toxic amount. If you're exposed to that much lead, you're dead. You're basically, it's bad.
Wow.
So it does not take that much to really mess you up permanently or kill you, which is why when you're remodeling, and back to if you're in a house that's older than 1978, and there are an awful lot of Richmond houses that are back way older than that.
Yeah.
there's actually a lot of stuff that if you do any remodeling, any renovations, if you disturb 6 square feet, for example, and the way that they come up with this number, it all depends on the EPA's interpretation. Basically, if you have a window that's 2 feet by 3 feet, that's 6 square feet. If you take that window out, you have disturbed, according to them, enough lead, if your house has lead, to be a toxic amount. So they get really serious if they see anybody doing renovations without proper precautions, because it's bad enough when you're exposing yourself to lead. Like, let's say you're a handy do-it-yourselfer, and you're in there and you sand the walls down and you repaint. It's bad enough you're poisoning yourself, but the problem is lead is one of those things. It goes everywhere. And it can be in the carpet, and then somebody's child is crawling around on your carpet and you don't even pay attention. You're like, oh, carpet's clean. Well, they could be crawling around in a toxic amount of lead.
There's lead in that carpet.
So if you're in a house that's older than 1978, definitely don't play around with any renovations. Don't sand anything. Don't tear off anything without creating dust. Go to the EPA's website and renovate. I think it's Renovate Safely, or epa.gov/lead. Basically, you can look that up, but I know we got way off topic there, but lead is not only in the water, but it's also in our environment, because they used it in paints, shellacs, varnishes. They actually still use it on, it's an excellent, lead kills everything, including people.
Oh, well.
But it's really good for protecting things from corroding. So I can't help but wonder, whenever I come down here to the studio, I go over the bridge. It's a really old bridge. And they've got all this like tarps and stuff, like drop claws.
Right.
You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They're working on repainting underneath there, fixing and repainting. And I never gave it a second thought. But when I was in the lead training, they said, yeah, they still use lead paints, just not in residential. Because lead is so good at fixing corrosion and stuff like that, they use it on bridges. So I'm like, oh, wonderful. I'm driving by this bridge. I just make sure I don't have the windows down.
Just keep your windows up and make sure your cabin air filter is good.
Yes, change your cabin air filter. But yeah, so that's lead. But lead in bottled water. This is an interesting little factoid. In 1973, they said, okay, well, lead in public drinking water, lead should not exceed 15 parts per billion. That's a very, very tiny number. In bottled water, they said, oh, well, we're going to go down. We're going to make it even stricter. We're going to say 5 parts per billion with a B.
I like stricter.
Yeah, stricter is better in bottled water. But that's just a recommendation. It's not an enforceable thing. So I think they threw that out there more for marketing.
Right, right. Yep, yeah.
But yeah, that's lead. There's so many scary things out there in the water.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about bottled water, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the 1973 bottled water voluntary standards, because we just kind of let that cat out of the bag.
Right.
So in 1973, they basically came up with these voluntary standards, and other than that, there's no regulation on bottled water.
Right.
And people think, oh, well, I'm not going to drink tap water. I'm going to drink bottled water. And here's a terrifying fact. It's estimated that 25% of bottled water is literally tap water. They've done nothing to it. Nothing. You think you're getting some magical, purified, clean water, and they literally just put the water right out of the tap right into a bottling process, and that's what you get.
Couldn't they get in trouble with that, considering that a lot of bottled water has like the like the reverse osmosis.
They'll
Notice.
volunteer that. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Right. So there was some tests done, and they found in 5 states, which I'll name them because people are probably wondering. In 5 states, North Carolina, California, Virginia, Delaware, D.C., and Maryland, there were carcinogens in the bottled water that, quote, substantially exceeded the voluntary standards. I don't know what's scarier, that they substantially exceeded or the fact that they just spelled out that they're voluntary standards. Sure, we'll try to abide. And bottled water is regulated by the FDA. So you think you're protected, right? Because FDA, that's their job.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to love this. The testing that's done on these, because it's voluntary,
Mm-hmm.
it is not required that it has to go to a certified laboratory. They can do their own in-house testing. They can send it to, there's some clown up in this adjacent area that tests out of his house, and you put, I can't even say it without laughing. You put your sample in his mailbox without being refrigerated, and he comes out at some point and gets the sample and tells you what's in it. There's no chain of custody. The whole thing is it just makes me laugh.
Yeah, let me drop a vial of water into this address at Johnson Street or whatever, and then trust that result's going to be good.
Yeah, hopefully he gets to it, immediately. But yeah, so it doesn't have to go to a certified laboratory. The only thing they have to do is list the ingredients and the nutritional value. Isn't that crazy?
Why is it so poorly regulated?
Well, that's just how it is. The government is...
Yep.
Yep, it's about the Benjamins. So the bottled water industry, I think I covered that on another one, is $93 billion in 2022, I think is what it ended up.
Wow.
$93 billion.
That's a lot of money.
Just in the U.S. That's just the U.S. market.
Yeah.
So there is an awful lot of money. And whenever there's an awful lot of money, there's an awful lot of shenanigans going on.
Of course.
But, yeah, hopefully that cleared up a little bit of the bottled water question. We did not even get to a couple of my cool, heavy-hitting topics here. But hopefully this is enough to let everybody get excited and tune in next time. Because, the next episode, we're going to talk about drugs.
They told me to avoid those in school, Paul.
Yeah, drugs are bad. Well, they're definitely bad when they're in your water. But we can't go into that today. And the other thing is BPA. Most people have heard about BPA.
I have heard about BPA. It's on every water bottle that you can buy now.
What does it say?
No BPA.
It says BPA free.
BPA free.
So this is mind-blowing. But we'll cover it next time. But they've replaced BPA with BPS in most cases. And BPS is almost identical in terms of its bad impacts.
Great.
And then it gets worse. We'll cover more of that later. Hopefully everybody's all excited to tune in next time for more of the Water Guy Show. Yes. For Paul and Ethan. And we'll keep you excited about water. And the most important thing is that if you hopefully are a little bit concerned about what you might be putting inside your body, definitely reach out to us, 877-60-WATER or Connecticut Richmond, and we will be able to help you further, ask any questions, actually give us some ideas for future content. If there's something out there you're just dying to know more about, we'd love to hear it. And you can send us an email. I didn't even mention that one before. freewatertest@connecticutrichmond.com.
Oh, that's handy.
And we will see you next time. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Connecticut Water Guy Hour. Join us next week for another edition with Paul, your Connecticut Water Guy. Opinions expressed on the program may not necessarily reflect the views of station management and ownership. Portions of the recording.